Hey everyone. All right, let's give it a minute for everyone to join. Outstanding. I guess we can start. Christina was here, global manager of UiPath community, but she had to go because there was some sort of emergency with another webinar. So she was going to tell us a little about UiPath community and what's it all about, but I'm pretty sure we can do it next time because this is the first official meetup of the Warsaw community. I'm Karl, chapter leader, and we'll have many more of these, many more for devs, for businesses. So we'll have plenty of more to come. All right. So like I said, I'm Karl, Warsaw chapter leader and co-founder, lead architect at Flobotics. And I'll let Hiba introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Hiba Beldi. I'm the Paris chapter leader, and I'm very honored to have been invited to this first event for Warsaw. And I'm also RPA consultant at Kora Partners, and I'm MVP, 2022 MVP. Thank you very much, Karl.
Not a problem. Not a problem. All right. So like I said, this is the kickoff webinar for Warsaw UiPath community. We are recruiting. We are looking for developers in every stage of their journey to join our community to make it something great. We're going to be doing webinars. We're going to be doing live events. I don't know, pizza parties, you name it. So we want to make it real family-oriented, cool place to talk about everything UiPath. And big shout out to Christina Vidu, which she had to leave right before everyone jumped on. So, but I'm sure she'll come during the next webinar. All right, so for the first webinar, I just want to do something real simple, something I feel passionate about, and something myself and Hiba think is super important to know to become a great developer. So what that is the REF framework. And this webinar is not so much on how to use the REF framework. It's about just a crash course on what it is and why we should use it. What are the benefits of it and things like this. If you have any questions, please leave a comment. Just remember it. We'll answer them at the end of the webinar. And I see people are posting their LinkedIn links. So if you can do that also, maybe we can all connect on LinkedIn. All right, so I'll let Hiba onto the next slide about what the REF framework is.
Yeah, so the first question that I have for the Warsaw community is basically, what is the REF framework for us, for you? Because I see there are at least 16 people. Does anyone want to unmute himself and tell us his vision of the REF framework? What is it? Or maybe he doesn't know about it.
Yeah, what is it for you? Anyone?
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. I see Piotr. I see a Piotr in here. Piotr, maybe if you can unmute yourself and tell us what the REF framework means for you. Marisha wrote it's a template.
Yes.
Template. Any other comments?
Definitely.
Does anyone want to? Can you unmute yourself? Maybe I didn't turn this option on. I'm pretty sure you can.
Yeah, we can unmute ourselves. We can.
Oh, hey, Sebastian.
Hey.
Hey. So what is the RPA? What is the REF framework for you? What does it mean?
Yeah, more than a template, I would say. Framework on which we can base almost every robot that we develop. It's super structured and
oh, and he muted muted himself. But yeah, you guys are right. It's a template.
Super stable to use. I just said it. Yeah.
Exactly. Everything I agree with.
Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, Mauricio. So let's go for the next slide to know what is REF framework. So basically, it's this thing, I would say. In the IT world, we often work with frameworks Like for instance, when we're working on web, we can use like frameworks to know what is in the front, what is in the back. How do we, like ordinate, yes, everything. And the REFramework is also a framework, but for the RPA developers. So REFramework stands for Robotic Enterprise Framework. So as you can see here, it's pretty structured. So first we have the initialization, then we have to get the transaction data. So to get the data, the next data, then process the data that becomes a transaction. And then if there are still data, so we still loop in it. And once there are no more data, it's the end of the process. So yeah, the goal of the REFramework is to allow us developers, when we open a code, to directly understand where we can modify elements, where we can start to write the code. It's easier, it's more structured. That way it's easier for us to start pretty quickly the code. So this is the vision of the REFramework that I have. It's also, as Mauricio and Sebastian said, a template because it's already existing in UiPath. It's already available. When we click on it, it's directly being created. This REFramework has a particular style because it's linked directly with the queues with Orchestrator. So this is basically what is the REFramework. Karl, I don't know if you want to add something about this.
No. I think I'll add some more. Maybe if you can explain exactly what a transactional, because this REA framework is made for transactional processes. Maybe if you can explain the difference between a linear process and a transactional system.
Yeah, definitely. Let's take, for instance, an example. So when we have a process, we have different approaches that we can have. Like it can be linear and it can be transactional. There are different elements like drawbacks and benefits for each of these systems. What is basically a transaction? It's, for instance, let's say that we're at the human resource level and we have like 5 new people that are coming. So we need to do an onboarding. A human resource person would do like create the person on the human resource system and then send a mail. So the IT team would add this person, like technically in the company, for instance, in the company numbers. And then we would say a welcoming message for the person that is welcomed. So the transactional system would be like, okay, let's take the first person, then let's add it to the human resource system, then add it to the IT system, then send him a mail, etc. And that would be the same thing. So for instance, for Pascal, for Michelle, etc., and for the 3 other people. With the linear system, it's another approach. It's, for instance, let's add the 5 of the people directly on the human resource system, and then let's add the 5 people into the IT system, and then send them a mail. So it's a little bit a different structure. That way we prioritize the action. So we need absolutely that everyone is put inside the human resource system, then the IT system, then the mail. So this is the difference between linear and transactional system.
All right.
Does it answer to your question, Karl?
Yeah, sounds good. So I'm gonna sum up in 2 sentences. The easiest way I can explain this is that a linear system does one thing once, and a transactional system does one thing many times. So I think that's the easiest way I can put, basically, in layman's terms, what this does. This might be an overgeneralization, but it seems to me that with attended robots, so robots that are meant to work with humans, a linear system is often used because the human needs to do something. It needs to turn on the robot to do one thing, and then it takes over where the robot finished. And for transactional systems, it's kind of, it works in the cloud by itself. So it does, thousands and thousands of transactions, and it just does them kind of in a loop. So that's, at least from my experience, that's how it looks like.
Yeah, I would say it depends. Like I've seen basically most of the cases, like you said, linear with attended and transactional with unattended, like on virtual machine, etc. But I've also seen linear on virtual machines. For instance, I don't know if you know SAP, the famous IT system. So basically, there are people that are creating linear system just to download, I mean, the report. And so they just need a linear process. instead
Exactly.
of
And
so we can see that.
these are the few examples that I've done with linear process for unattended. Is basically every day at 5 in the morning before employees come into work, we go into one system, we download some reports, we put it in the shared folder, so it's available for human workers, basically. All right, sounds good. Let's move on to the next thing, which is why we should use the REF framework. And REF stands for Robotic Enterprise Framework, if anyone was wondering that, because I didn't explain that too well. So Hiba, maybe you can tell us the downsides of it.
Yeah, maybe I could start. Maybe just before asking people, do they know that, like, what are the drawbacks and what are the benefits of using the REF framework?
Yeah, well, according to you guys, maybe write in the chat, what are some of the downsides with using the REF framework?
All the good sides can be the
Good
both of
sides,
them.
bad sides.
How can we date PowerPoint?
The PDD document. So that's out of the scope of here, let's say, because the PDD would come before the actual coding. Right now, we're just speaking about the coding process. So writing, how can we update the PDD document, PDD or PTT? Process design document. Yeah, which would become before the coding. So this is something that's done before the coding.
Okay, well, maybe I'll start with the drawbacks and we'll see like if the others are adding some elements. So basically the main drawbacks that we see as developers on the REF framework is the needs of time to understand how does it work. Because for the first time when we heard about the UiPath Academy, so we start to learn how UiPath works, how do we create a process, how do we have this logic of drag and drop, etc. So it's completely different from an engineer perspective or any IT developer perspective, because we're not used, you know, to drag and drop elements and add just arguments so everything works. And also it's an interesting logic, but this time we have already something that is already structured, and we need to understand how does it work, so we understand how and what do we need to change. So this time is really needed, so we understand the framework, then it's all right. And so the other drawback that we can see in the REF framework is when we need, you know, to change the type, because basically when we click on when we have the, you know, the template page and we click on REF framework, we have automatically the framework that is working and based on queues and on transactions and in this system directly with orchestrator. And so when we don't want to use orchestrator, or when we don't have basically orchestrator, we need to use this framework because it's handling pretty well errors, but we need to change the data type because it's not anymore the queues and the transaction types, etc. So we need to change everywhere, like for instance rows, or for instance strings if it's with files, etc.
Yeah.
So this is basically what we can see.
Exactly. I'll actually show an example at the end of here. So 2 examples, how to switch the REF for a linear process, basically to so it doesn't loop around, so it just does one thing, which is super easy. And I'll show you guys also how to just change the queue item into a string. So basically, instead of putting everything in the orchestrator, we're going to be using strings. For example, if we had, I don't know, PDFs to process, what we can do is we can change the transaction item to a string. We can get all of the file locations from a folder, and then that file location string can be the actual transaction data that goes through the process.
Great.
Awesome.
Now that we've seen the drawbacks, Karl, please tell us what are the benefits?
Lots of benefits. So what the REF framework does is it makes you think outside of only the meat of the process. So I would say the meat of the process is the process. What is actually being done, like the logic, like the read the PDF, take something out, you know, it makes you think about everything around it. So how we get the data, where the data is coming from, what type of exceptions are there, what type of business exceptions are there. We need to set up the REF framework for it to work on our task, and that makes us a better, I guess, architect and analyst at the same time, because it makes us think about everything around the process, not just the process itself. So this is like the transactional way of thinking. It's ready to work with Orchestrator. So most high volume enterprise solutions, we're going to want to use the Orchestrator. So we have some sort of analytics. We can see how many processes are failing and why they're failing, and it just makes debugging and kind of coming to conclusions much more easily. Another one I see a lot is this framework is known by the dev community. So many very good developers know the REF framework. So if I get a code from a good developer, or if I pass my code to someone else, I don't have to spend an hour analyzing the structure of their code. I know exactly where to check to see what type of transactional data they're using. I know exactly where to check to see how they initiate all the applications for the REF framework. So I know exactly what's where, and I know the meat of the automation is in the process block. So it just makes kind of this reusability between developers very important, and that's something you want if you plan on being a developer and a company, consultant. What else? Reusability and scalability. So for example, let's take an easy solution and someone's like, okay, REF's too much. I'm going to do this my way. And well, this is an easy example. This is only 5 invoices to process. So I'm just going to make something simple. The problem with this is not scalable. What happens later when we're not talking about 5 invoices, we're talking about 5,000 invoices. And we need to run it not on 1 computer, but on 10 computers. And this, we want to add some logical blocks and some exceptions because, processes change. By doing your own framework or doing something without a framework, just, I guess, in a while loop, you're not future-proofing your solution for when it can change and when we need to reuse it and make it scalable. And then also error handling, high volume resistance, high error resistance. This framework is made for different types of exceptions. We can specify what happens on what type of exception. If something fails, it reinitiates. So basically, a lot of the work is done for us to make the solution stable. Another thing is it's officially recommended by UiPath and it's up to date. So UiPath actually goes here and changes this REF framework to add new features to make it better. For example, not too long ago, I don't know how long ago, maybe 3-4 months ago, maybe longer, they added a feature which is very useful, that they have a consecutive error counter. So now if the same error happens 3-4 times in a row, well, you can decide, hey, if this error keeps happening, maybe something more important is happening. So we're just going to kill the process. 3 of the same errors in a row, we stop the process. Maybe someone gets a notification. And just things like this, they keep adding on. And there is a reason why UiPath recommends this. There's actually an entire course, Advanced UiPath Developer, that is only the REF. If you do the official certification, the UiPath certification, I think a large portion of that, maybe like 30% of it, is based on the REF. So it's not that, that oh, it's Karl says it's awesome and it's reusable and it's scalable. Actually, UiPath recommends this and puts a lot of time and effort for people to learn it. All right. Let's go next. So what I wanted to do now, maybe you had some comments on that, Hiba. Did you want to say anything about what I said? Maybe you have some other benefits that you can think of?
Yeah, also another benefit that is directly linked with the world of frameworks. It's just also easier for developers to take a look at your code, because when something is failing in the code, let's imagine I started the code, and then when we launch it into production, it's not anymore in my perimeter, it's Karl's perimeter. That way, with the REFramework, it's easier for Karl to immediately know where we need to see the activities that are failing, because it's directly into process or get transaction if there's another type of problem. So yeah, it helps us to directly pinpoint the places where we need to change elements.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. Sounds good. Maybe someone else.
I have a curiosity.
Yeah.
Um, from your experience, I mean, from the out of the project that you developed, or you or someone from the chat, um, what do you think would be an implementation for an improvement for RE framework? I don't know. Do you think that something is missing from it, or
So
not a downside, but an improvement? I don't know.
yeah, for
improvement.
sure. One of the cool things would be like these downsides that we said. Changing the data type everywhere if you don't want to use the orchestrator. This would be super cool feature if we can just basically use a drop down menu, or if there was somehow a way to change the data type with just one click. Because right now
Yes.
we have to change, I don't know, maybe like 10 different places. I do it real quick because I do it a lot actually. It takes me only a few minutes, but it's kind of confusing at first to know how to change, the queue item into a string or a data row, or any other, data structure or variable you want to change it to.
Yes,
So
another suggestion would be also to have a quick way, to convert transactional type to linear type. It would be great, instead of, removing get transaction data and trying to get all the arrows together. So yeah, there are different perspectives, and it's always good to always add elements on the framework. It's already pretty complex and complete, but yeah, we always find like new elements to add.
Okay, so you have that thing as well. Okay, thank you.
no problem, no problem. I'm actually gonna answer one of these questions. I knew I was gonna. I thought I said I knew I know I said I was gonna leave it to the end. But Mauricio is asking, should we recreate older projects into the framework? The answer for me is, until they're working, leave them alone. There's there's no need to fix something that works. No need at all. If it works, leave it. But when it comes to a point where it's not working anymore, or you need to add more logic, this is when I would suggest to transfer it into the REF framework.
Yeah, but be sure that your SDD is pretty complete, because if we don't have a framework when we open a project, there is no complete SDD. It's really tiring. And don't forget also to comment your code so we understand how is the code working.
Yeah, and then Jacek also said something that I touched upon. Standardization is super important in the REF, and that was, if I give this to another dev, if I give it to anyone else, basically, they know exactly where everything is. So that's a big plus. All right, what I wanted to do now is I wanted to kind of go through the thought process of a very simple example. So basically a control flow statement versus the REF. Control flow statement is any type of looping mechanism, while loop, do while loop for each row in data table. So let's take a very simple example, and it's manual data entry from Excel into a web application. So what we do is we have, someone comes to you, hey, we have this project. We have we have things, we have information in Excel or a CSV file, and we need to manually transfer it into a web application or a CRM or what have you. So let's go through the left side, basically. all we're thinking about, if we use a for each or a while loop, is kind of the meat of the process. And there are legitimate reasons to use a while loop or a for each loop. And this is when, I guess, when we don't need stability, where I just need results. For example, if I had to take information from a website, I don't know, a thousand different bits of information and throw it in a CSV, well, I'm going to write an automation in 10 minutes. I'm going to put in a while loop, and I'm just going to run it. I'm just going to run it. I'm going to watch it. I'm going to see if it fails. Leave it on debug. If it fails, then I'll just kind of correct something and let it run again. Because I don't ever plan on running this again, it's a one-time thing. So that's what the logic in that would be. But this is it, we read the CSV, we put it in process in the meat of, the meat of the automation, and that's basically it. And if you wanted to make this better, you would have to add your own logic, your own business exceptions, your own, logic to it. The problem with this is that if you only look at what the process is now, later it could be difficult to scale or reuse this. But if we go to the REF framework, oh, sorry, I clicked in the wrong place. Nope. Let's go back. Let's go back. All right.
Yes, I have a question.
Yep.
Sorry about this slide. How did you create this diagram of general business process?
Oh, this is, I'll show this to you at the end. It's just basically when you turn on UiPath Studio, you can pick from templates. I actually can show you real quick. Here, because I have this open. If you go to home and you go new project, it's right here. It's Robotic Enterprise Framework. So instead of picking a blank process, you can pick a template. And the one I always use is the Robotic Enterprise Framework.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right, no problem. All right, let's go to general business process. Well, here I'm thinking about not only the meat of the automation, which would be process transaction, I'm thinking about everything around it. So I'm thinking now what type of transactional data I'm using. I'm thinking about how are we getting that information into this framework. I'm also thinking if it even makes sense. Because when someone gives me an Excel file to read with information, my first question is like, how are we getting the Excel file? How are we even getting the Excel file? Is it automatically being generated or is someone manually filling it in? If the answer is someone's manually filling it in, I'm like, well, that's dumb. Let's automate that also. So someone, and the answer is, I don't know, someone's taking information out of the CRM, putting it in this Excel, giving it to the automation developer, and the automation developer writes a code that pushes it into another web application or CRM. We can go and automate that. We can actually make two automations, a dispatcher and a performer. One that takes all the information we need, throws in an orchestrator, and one that actually takes the information from orchestrator and processes it. And then we can even go further. We can say, hey, is there an API for this CRM at the beginning? Let's even streamline this better, because the most optimal for me solution is if queue items just magically appear in orchestrator. And you can do this. You can just make an API call, throw transaction data in the orchestrator, and then have the performer start right away. Right. So these are the things that you kind of widen your scope and think about when using the REF. Another thing is the exceptions, because there could be different kind of exceptions. I know business exceptions, system exceptions, states for success. So you're kind of forced to think about what could go wrong. What could go wrong with this automation, and what can we do if we encounter this problem? So it kind of just lets you think outside of the box. Think outside of the box, you become a better analyst, you become a better architect, and I think all of these things together make a really is what makes a regular developer stand out from, or pro developer stand out from a regular developer. Opposite way. Makes sense. Any comments from anyone about that? Maybe someone doesn't agree with what I said.
Makes sense. Well, for me, it's open to debate.
Oh, good. I fully agree.
It does make a lot of sense. I'm just curious about another thing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that which kind of project wouldn't you tailor it for REFramework?
So I would not put anything outside of the REF framework if it's going to an end client. So
Okay.
stuff I do for personal use, or stuff I do when someone says I only need results. But if you only need results and the application, the robot's going to be running for days, REF framework. If you only need results and the robot's going to be running for a half an hour, then I'll just write it in a while loop, because there's no point. A lot of times there's a lot of logic with the exceptions and the business exceptions and restarting the program. So, if the robot's only going to run for an hour, I can write a robot like this for 10, 15 minutes to scrape some data, throw it in a CSV file. So it doesn't make sense for me to spend another 2-3 hours thinking about everything that can go wrong. I'll just press debug. If there is an error for some reason, the automation stops. I can kind of fix, the screen, to fix the screen, and I can click play again. So that's the times I don't use the REF framework.
Got it. Thank you.
Awesome. Sounds good. So let's go to common questions. Common questions people might have about the REF framework. Hiba, I'll take the first one. The difference between a dispatcher and a performer. I talked a little about that before.
Yeah, definitely. For the people that have been following, the UiPath Academy courses, we often speak of dispatcher and performer. So what is dispatcher and what is performer? Dispatcher is the fact to add elements to the queues, because when you're on Orchestrator, you have to create the queue and it's by default empty. And so to create transactions, to add elements to these queues, you need to dispatch it. So dispatch from somewhere to Orchestrator, for instance. If you want to perform actions with, for instance, files, then you will dispatch. So you'll have, like, for instance, assign and get like path, get all files, etc. And so you have all the files, and then you dispatch each of them inside Orchestrator, inside the Orchestrator queue. Or for instance, when you're with an Excel file and each row needs to be in transaction, then you dispatch with the file, one row equals to one transaction. So this is the fact of dispatching. The performer is definitely going from the queue items. So the queue is already full, and so you perform the action. So you get the data, the first element, and then you process the data, then you go to the second element, etc., until you have no data. So this is basically the difference between dispatcher and performer. So the performer is the REFramework itself, because it's doing it. The dispatcher can be another XAML file. It can be out of your REFramework, or it can be inside the initialization part, inside the initialization state.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you can create a XAML file, fill in inside the dispatcher, and inside the initialization, you have if config is nothing. So if it's the first run, then you fill it.
I can go here and show what you mean.
Well, it's my specification. I don't know if every developer is doing it, but this inside the config is nothing. I'm checking if the queue is empty. If the queue is empty, then I'm filling it.
Yeah.
So yeah, different strategies.
All right. Oh, go back.
So yeah, it's okay. So this is basically for the first question. The second question, Karl, is for you.
Yeah, how do I change the transaction data? So I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this right now, and I'm also going to show you how to change the This is not working the way I want it to. Okay. I will change the transactional data. I haven't done this in a while, so we can see how fast I do it. And then also how to make this a linear process. So this one's super easy. After we initialize, we don't get transaction data because there is no transaction data. We just want to do one thing. That's it. And now what we have to do is we have to kind of change the statuses. So if the process is successful, it goes to end. If the process is not successful, it goes to the end. There's no other transactions. If there's a business exception, I guess this is up for debate. If you want to go back to initialization for some reason, or if you want to go to end process, I guess this would depend on the business case. That's easy. That's the easy part. And now, and you can actually delete this because now it doesn't do anything, or you can just keep it here just for sentimental value. All right. Now let's change the transaction type. I'm going to change it to string. Kind of UiPath makes it easy for us because now we have errors, right? So let's see what type of errors we have. This is a quirk because this is actually correct. It just has the old value in memory. So if we just, I think this works, and then do nothing again. Let's see if that worked. Nope, that didn't work.
No, it's supposed to
Oh
work.
yeah.
Yeah, I see
Okay.
it.
Yeah. Okay. It does work. So that's kind of just a little bit of a glitch. It seems silly, but it actually makes sense if you understand how the compiler works. Okay. Now we need to go here into get transactional data. We need to go to arguments. We need to change this into string. All right, and this doesn't make any sense anymore. So we can just kind of disable it. There are some things to change here if we're doing a string, but I guess that's not a talk for today. I just want to change the values. We also need to click on import arguments again. Oh, I didn't save. You need to save, so let's save it. Let's go back to main. And let's put the transaction item in here again. That's pretty much done, that part. If we go back to main, we'll see another error. So let's just keep digging and finding errors.
This is the
Process.
beginning of the journey.
This is process. Okay. So we need to also change the transactional item in here. We go in arguments. We change this to string. We save the file. We go back. This seems super boring. It is. So that's why it would be nice if we had this option of just clicking one thing and having it automatically change everywhere. Transaction item. All right. Now set transaction status. Same thing. We do here. We open the workflow. We go to arguments.
And we do the same things.
And
Maybe just to add just a little information, because we've spoken of initialization, get transaction data, process, and end. Inside the process, when you process something, you have at the end to decide if the process has been like failing, or is successful, or is inside the business exception. That's why the set transaction status is very important. Just to document.
All right, did I save? I did save. Let me switch this. I think that's it. We have to change one more thing in set transaction status. I forgot, but we'll come back to that. And whenever I don't know if I'm finished, I can just go back to main and see if there's any mistakes, which there is mistakes, and that's in the that's set transaction data, because these are meant to work with queue items. So if we can just kind of comment those out, you can change the logic a little bit also for it to work with a string, but just for it to work, we need to disable these.
Yes. So for instance, if we're working with files we need to replace the set transaction status with, for instance, move file, or if it's with an Excel file, assign inside the data row the elements. So this is the idea.
Oh, I'm still getting one error. Let's see where this error is.
Oh yeah, it's inside the caches.
It's inside the caches.
And I don't know if it's with this REFramework version or with the older one, but also inside the finally, you might find some elements.
No, this looks fine to me. Set transaction status. Oh, because of the arguments. Okay. Totally makes sense. And then transaction item can go transaction item. Okay. And then we have to do this 3 times because this set transaction status is in 3 different places. It's here, it's exception, and it's in finally. No, it's not in finally. Okay.
They removed it, but it was before.
Okay. Okay. So those are the 3 places. Those are all the places we need to change for it to become not connected with the queue. Awesome. Let's go to finish these. Difference between Hiba, next one.
Yes, difference between business and system exception. So system exception, if you're already an IT developer into another language, you already know what is a system exception. It's when your code is stopping, is failing, there is an error, index out of range, or it's empty, there is a problem. So every time the program does not work, it gives a system exception. But then what is a business exception? A business exception is a fully created exception from UiPath. It's when there is a problem with the process itself. It's not in the code, it's in the process. For instance, I remember the example of Karl. If I take your example, it's about the patients. So inside the health centers, we have some fields, so some elements. So for instance, if it's for a patient that is under 18, then we cannot treat this transaction. And if the person is above 18, then we treat the transaction. So
exactly.
If someone is under 18, it's considered as a business exception because we're not supposed to treat this element. So we move to the next transaction. So yeah, this is basically the difference between business and system exception. And so how do we create a business exception? If you could answer, Karl.
This is pretty easy. All we got to do is throw, right? So if we have some logic and we have, I don't know, an if statement, if the patient is under 18, well, we're just going to throw a business exception. And this is new business exception, and we can write, something specific. Patient, I can't write today, is under 18. Is under 18, right?
Yes.
Let me show you what happens here. So we're in the process state. Usually this is, this goes to get transactional data. So if the patient is under 18, we want to skip that patient. If we want to continue the automation, we want to skip that patient. So we kind of just throw a business exception, and it goes and gets the next patient. Yeah, exactly. All right. Let's do Hiba. Is REF needed for UiPath certification?
So the answer is yes. So for UiPath certifications, there are 2 types. there is the associate and there is the URD. So the associate is, for instance, for business analysts or for people that are starting to develop. So they have a common base and they want to be acknowledged with this base. And so they just need to know what are the activities and how UiPath works in general, etc. So if you're interested by this, you can write like associate certification UiPath, and you'll have a PDF with all the elements to get ready for this certification. And for the URD, so it's an advanced certification. It stands for UiPath Advanced Robotic Process Automation Developer, so UIARD. And so yeah, the difference between URD and associate is an advanced level. And the advanced level is acquired when you know what is REFramework, when you know how the orchestrator works and what is the logic behind transactions, linear, and the queue items, transactions, etc. So this is basically the difference.
Okay.
So yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, and then the last question, there is an enhanced REF framework, and I get questions about this. What is this? This is even the more complicated version of the REF. I would only recommend that for very advanced users, I guess, because it has many layers to it. It's basically like REF frameworks inside of REF frameworks. You have the process layer, the transactional layer. So it's more advanced. I personally prefer to do multiple just robots. You know, if I need 2 dispatchers and 1 performer, I personally like to do this because I guess it makes it easier to debug. If I know there's a problem in dispatcher 1 where I can go to this robot and I can fix it. But if you put everything together, it becomes more complex. So
personally, honestly, I've never used an enhanced. I just sticked with the RF because it's already complete. But if I have the chance, I'll tell you the next time.
Okay, let me go to this last slide, and then I'll let Christina say a few words. I see she's back on the call, and I promised that I would give her the spotlight for a few minutes. So common responses. I've checked so many codes in my life because I recruit a lot. You know, even people ask me to give them tasks so that I can check their, I guess, how good of a developer they are and to give them tips. And one of my first questions is, almost always actually, is why you didn't use the REF framework. And these are the 3 most responses I get. So I just wanted to break down these responses and basically give you my answer, right? Kind of, yeah. So the first one, the task was too easy. There are very easy tasks. There are easy tasks. When I give usually a task to someone, it's, hey, process these 5 invoices. Process these 5 invoices. And it's, you know, and to pull out 1 date from it or the invoice number. It is very easy. Mostly anyone that you know does UiPath, that's a programmer, can do these tasks. But you're only looking then at this task, and you're not, I guess, future-proofing this automation, because if it was written in the REF framework, and also the nice thing about REF framework is the more you use it, the faster it gets. So actually, me putting something in the REF framework now at my stage of programming is faster than trying to think of something that's not the REF framework. But if the task was too easy, if the task gets more difficult, if we change it from 5 invoices to 5,000, if we want to, like I said, scale this from 1 computer to 10 computers, you know, this is where it gets more difficult. So this just future-proofs the solution. It makes it, you know, more resistant to errors, and it also makes you just a better developer in the process, because it makes you think of everything around, you know, the automation, not just the process part. That's kind of what the next thing is. It wasn't needed for this example, and I wanted to show that I could do my own framework. So a lot of people actually make their own, state machines, their own flows, which is awesome. I think it's very awesome when you're beginning to learn. Because it's important to know what state machines do. It's important to know the difference between state machines, between sequences, and other flow structures. But I think it's even more impressive if someone knows the REF framework in and out. If someone knows every single portion of it, because that means they're closer to understanding the structure of a process, of process automation, that it's not just one thing, it's many things. It's initialization, it's end, it's transitions, it's errors. So this is my response to questions like this, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I would add something, because you said there's something very interesting. We had a similar event with the Paris chapter around the REFramework. And I remember one of the speakers were saying, yeah, when I find a developer that is pretty at ease with the framework, I'm asking him, to start from scratch and recreate the framework to see if he really masters the framework. So we can have like different human resource people. But yeah, I just remember this when you said about the framework.
That's a pretty hard task. I would have to.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try this one day. I don't think I'll succeed, but that's that's a pretty interesting task.
Yeah.
Awesome. Sounds good. I think that's it. I'll let Christina say a few things. Once again, this webinar is thanks to her. She organized it. She is the global manager for the UiPath community. So I'll let her say a few words.
Only if there are no more questions for the session, because I think that's the most important thing from now on.
All right.
Are there any other questions, guys, for Hiba or Karl? I think this is the high time for you to place those questions and really benefit from the knowledge we have today here.
Let me scan also through the questions. I noticed some people.
I think that Mauricio has questions around the PDD, because we did not fully understand your question. If you want to tell us more details about this, Mauricio.
Yes, thank you. It's related to the PDD, as we are doing all the design at the beginning of the process, and now we're doing the design on the code itself. When we have a new requirement or new addition or modification for the project, how is related this tool, this framework to the PDD? Do we need to update that, or how will be connected on that?
Well, there are different elements. Maybe I'll start answering, then Karl, if you have other information. So we have a tool in UiPath tools, because you see we have Studio, Orchestrator, AI Fabric, etc. And there is a tool that is called Task Capture. And basically, how does it work? It's a way to construct your PDD. And then there is a button that allows us to, convert what you've been taking as pictures during your task capture tool into a code, but it's not really useful, because when you create the code from task capture, often you have to start from scratch because it's not useful. So the action, there is no automatic button, from code to PDD. It does not exist. There is something that already exists. It's still a draft from task capture to code. It's not really useful. And so the answer is when the process owner asks for a change, you have to do the change in the code, and you have to edit inside the PDD. I don't know, what do you think about this, Karl?
No, yeah, I agree. But the PDD shouldn't have any really coding stuff in it. That's just the I guess the process definition, kind of from the business side. So you can do the entire PDD before you even start coding, and then if there's any changes to the code, the SDD, the solution design document, would be a good place to document that.
Okay, perfect. That was my question.
Great, thank you, Mauricio, for the question.
Thank you.
Anybody else with questions for Hiba or Karl? Okay, if that's it, then I can start closing because I couldn't open. We had another session at this time. So I'm Christina, as Karl said, I'm the Global Manager for Marketing Community in UiPath. And I'm very happy to welcome the Warsaw chapter today in our big family. And I just want to show you a bit how big that family is. So for those of you who are not yet very familiar with community in UiPath and what community can give you in terms of learning resources, experience exchange, and simply like support you in your automation journey, please check out our website, our hub, community.uipath.com. And here you will find all the resources linked. So upcoming events, local chapters, training resources, blogs, documentation, insider preview, components on marketplace, and our community programs, of course, which are advocacy programs for leaders in our community. So as you can see, community in UiPath is a pretty complex ecosystem. Of course, Hiba and Karl already know that, with Karl being the new chapter leader for Warsaw and Hiba being chapter leader and UiPath MVP now. So she's activating in 2 programs in community. And just to show you how big our community is and what we have to offer. So of course we have these global chapters, but then in Europe, where we now welcome and are very proud to welcome Warsaw chapter, we have all these locations with local chapters. So please make sure that you did join Warsaw chapter for upcoming events. And also I gave you the links for LinkedIn, for Hiba, and for Karl. And please connect with Karl for future sessions. And if you want to contribute to this chapter, to bring themes and to make sessions happen together with Karl on this Polish chapter, you're all welcome at any time. All the chapters you see here in our global community are open for anyone to contribute at any time, and we are waiting for suggestions. I will also give you our email address at community. So if you want to contact us on email and suggest anything, but you have also full access through the site to our programs and chapters. So at any time you can join and activate, and you also have ways to contribute here. So you can see plenty of ways to contribute in order to work up to one of these programs. So that being said, I will stop sharing now. I hope all of you really enjoyed the session today. I'm really proud that we have this Polish chapter now in Warsaw, and our family just got bigger. And also I'm very proud that Hiba is here to support from Paris, because we need this every time a new chapter is born. We need a little bit of kickoff. So this is why if you can help and amplify this to your peers for them to join our Warsaw chapter and make this community grow bigger, wiser, more experienced, we would really appreciate it. Thank you once again for coming today. Thank you, Hiba. Thank you, Karl.
Thank you, guys. I just wanted to say, if any of you guys want to reach out to me, you can do so through LinkedIn. If you have any suggestions on maybe what you would want to see in the future, what type of sessions, webinars, you know, whether it be more coding, whether it be more business, you know, what business processes, what's possible to automate, any suggestions you have, just, you know, throw them at me on LinkedIn.
Yes, because community also is also oriented and it sort of customizes to your needs. So anything that you think might help you in your current career or current expertise, anything you want to learn or simply experience exchange or brainstorm through, just please connect with Karl and let's make that happen. So everything that would help you in your current automation journey. Okay.
All right.
Thank you, guys. Have a nice evening, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Hiba. Thank you, Karl.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Karl, you can like click on the stop recording.
I thought you were recording, no?
Uh-oh.
Oh, no.